All right, welcome back to Green. Francesco and Emma here. Em, ciao. How are you?
Ciao, Francesco. It's been a hot and sticky week to the start of London Climate Action Week. But if you're anything like me that's worked in climate change for as long as we have, then you just want to run around shouting, "I told you so," at everyone in the street
Yeah.
with the headlines screaming their alarm. And somebody did point out a pertinent point, which was, this isn't the hottest summer we've had for a long time. This is potentially one of the cooler summers that we're going to expect in the future.
Yes.
That's pertinent, isn't it?
Looking at the glass half full. It's a good start.
Always.
Wonderful. Well, today on Green, we're joined by Matt Meredith, the Chief Technology Officer of Undo, one of the companies trying to scale enhanced rock weathering as a serious carbon removal solution. The idea sounds almost too simple. Take certain types of crushed rocks, spread them on land, let rain and soil chemistry do their work, removing CO₂ from the atmosphere. But behind that simple idea, there are much harder questions. How do you prove the carbon has actually been removed? How do you build a credible carbon credit around it? And can this ever scale into something bankable? Matt, welcome to Green.
Hello, thank you. Great to be here. And thank you for telling everyone everything they need to know about enhanced rock weathering.
Well,
Yeah, okay, so we can finish the episode now. Bye.
Good, job done.
I still feel a little bit none the wiser, Matt, I'll be honest. Francesco's been going on about the ER what now? Can we delve into this properly? Can you take me from the top? Enhanced rock weathering. Let's dig into each one of those. Let's start with rock.
Yes.
Rock. What sort of rock?
Okay. Lots of different types of rock, predominantly silicate rocks. So shall I just expand a little bit on what ERW is, despite that great overview just now? And thank you also for getting the acronym in there, because I will never remember to call it enhanced rock weathering. It's far too much of a mouthful. So yeah, like you said, ERW, I guess actually the first thing maybe to talk about is, I know this is quite a question you asked, sorry, but can we talk just briefly about carbon removal? Because it's obviously all about carbon removal, and I'm guessing that most of your listeners are already familiar with that and why it's so important. But your comments about the hot summer were excellent, and we all know about climate change. We all know that we need to reduce our emissions, but we've got to a point now where, if we want to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, it's no longer good enough to just reduce our emissions. We've actually got to start removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and we've got to do that at pretty high scale. Estimates are anywhere between like 5 and 16 gigatons a year of carbon removals we need to be achieving, and the technology for doing that at the moment is really nascent. The biggest projects are removing tens of thousands of tons a year. So we are, like how's my maths? I'm a mathematician. That doesn't mean I'm good with numbers. Something like 1 million times short of where we need to be. So
A drop in a bathtub.
Yeah, drop in a bathtub. So we're busy trying to develop approaches doing that, and one of them is enhanced rock weathering. And like you say, it's a fairly simple process, really. You take, in fact, it's not even a process. It's a naturally occurring phenomenon. When it rains, carbon dioxide absorbs in rainwater, forming a carbonic acid that falls on rock, silicate rocks in particular, and a chemical reaction takes place which turns the carbon dioxide into carbonates. Those carbonates are then washed down into the soil, out into the waterways of the oceans, where they remain effectively permanently, certainly for tens of thousands of years, permanently locking away that carbon dioxide. So yeah, it's a natural process. Happens all the time, but it takes a long time. You put a boulder out there in the rain, it will take tens of thousands of years for that boulder to completely weather away. We take sources of rock, we crush them very finely, or we find rock that is already crushed finely, and we spread it out over a large area. And that accelerates that natural process, so that instead of taking tens of thousands of years, it takes maybe 5 or 10 years for the rock to weather completely and remove that carbon dioxide.
Okay, so coming back to it then, enhanced rock weathering. So the enhancement is the smashing it up into small pieces to increase the surface area, correct? And spreading it about. The weathering you have described quite nicely in terms of that scientific term, although I want to come back to that a little bit. Are all rocks created equal?
No.
Okay.
Started as a enhanced rock weathering ERW project developer operating mainly in Scotland, where we were using Basalt, so UK Basalt. And we were taking this from quarries in Scotland where it was already available finely ground as a kind of a byproduct. You know, they take the bigger bits of rock out and use it for a range of other purposes. They're left with the really finely ground stuff. That's great. That's perfect for us. We started in Scotland. Basalt is great, and it's going to be a really important part of the ERW story if we scale to gigaton, because it's so abundant, you know, globally.
Okay.
I can't remember the stats about exactly how much basalt there is, but there's huge amounts of it. The problem is it's relatively slow weathering. So even if you grind it quite finely, it can take something like 20 years for the rock to weather completely. And each ton of rock you spread, or for each ton of carbon you want to remove, you have to spread about 4 tons of rock. So it's about a 4-to-1 ratio with basalt. Other feedstocks, like the feedstock that we're now operating primarily in Canada with a feedstock called Canadian wollastonite, which is a wollastonite heavy rock source. Don't ask me about what wollastonite is. I'm not a geologist. What I can tell you is it weathers much faster. So there we're talking, instead of 20 years, we're talking maybe 5 years for the rock to weather completely. And you're talking about a ratio of about 1 to 2 as well. So 1 ton of carbon dioxide removed for every 2 tons of rock that you spread. So there's a massive difference between rock sources.
That's interesting. Okay. And then let me just follow it through the journey here. You've described the rocks absorbing the carbon dioxide and going into the watercourse, going into the soils. And so I can appreciate it's no longer in the atmosphere. So you kind of solved the climate change problem at that point. But where does it ultimately end up? Where does it go? What's the sort of the storage and the long-term solution here that you're aiming for?
So the carbonates end up in the ocean. And there they actually, one of the things about enhanced rock weathering, it has lots of co-benefits. One of the things that carbonates do is they actually help to reverse the acidification of the oceans, which is valuable. I believe, and again, you're getting to the ends of my expertise, but I believe that actually a lot of the carbonates actually end up being turned into shells of marine creatures, where they ultimately end up laid down on the floor of the ocean, and they get turned back into rock. But this is obviously over a long time period.
Yeah.
The ocean has the ability to store, you know, large quantities of carbonates just within itself.
Great.
Well, that's
Francesco,
also,
you were going to jump in.
Yeah, well, the end of the, let's say, enhanced rock weathering, it is actually spinned off into another branch of weathering, which is ocean alkalinity enhancement, where basically it is
Indeed.
just the end part of ERW. While it is incredibly fascinating, the entire cycle of it, there is one part that remains at the center of ERW, which is how do you actually prove that the CO₂ has been removed? And we get into what is the most difficult part in developing any CDR technology, which is the MRV, the measuring, reporting, and verification. Can you break down yours, please?
Yes, and thank you for clarifying what MRV stands for, because there's another acronym I can never remember what the R is. I always get it wrong. So
it is the
MRV,
boring part, the reporting.
Absolutely. You know, MRV, as you say, is absolutely critical, and it is probably the biggest challenge with enhanced rock weathering. We should probably talk later about the comparison of enhanced rock weathering to other removal mechanisms, but it has loads going for it, except for the measurement part, and it's really hard, because what you've got a chemical reaction taking place in an open system, and it's not just an open system; it's a horribly heterogeneous open system, because soil is, you know, you can take a sample of soil in one place, you can take another sample of soil 10 centimeters to the side, and it's completely different. You know, it's got much more sand or much more clay or completely different minerals in it. And so you're putting this rock in, you're allowing it to weather, the products of that chemical reaction are dissipating out through the soil, and somehow you've got to capture and evidence exactly what's happening there, so you know what has happened, how much of the rock is weathered, and indeed whether it has weathered by the mechanism that I outlined, which is resulting in the removal of carbon dioxide. There are, you know, lots of approaches being developed to quantifying enhanced rock weathering. It's an area of very active development, but all approaches pretty much are based around taking lots of soil samples and lots of pore water samples. So you take samples of the soil, and you take samples of the pore water, which is the water that exists sort of in freedom, sort of between the soil granules. So you're out there with an auger, you're taking lots of soil cores, and you're sending them off for analysis. And you're trying to capture that pore water, which is particularly challenging because there's a number of different ways of doing it. You can use rhizomes or lysimeters, the traditional approach, but they only work when it's really wet and there's a lot of water in the soil. So you're quite dependent upon the climate and getting adequate rainfall to capture it. The pore water exists, all the time, but unless there's enough of it, it's very hard to extract. And so that's somewhere where we have some technology we're developing that we could talk about. In terms of analyzing the soil, the thing that we're looking for is we're using an approach called TCA, which is total cation accounting. And so when you add rock to the soil, you see the number of cations in the soil increase significantly. As the rock weathers and those carbonates get washed out of the soil, you see the cations in the soil decrease again back towards your baseline. And so you're trying to measure that. And in order to, again, going back to that really heterogeneous system, it requires you to take a lot of samples to eliminate the background noise and pick out that signal against the noise, because it's a relatively small signal against what is often a high background noise in terms of the amount of calcium, for instance, that's already in the soil.
So give us an idea of scale here, Matt. How much are you putting on the soil over what area, and then how much are you sort of looking for when you're doing the testing to see that it's still there and hasn't blown away in the wind?
Yeah. So I see if I can remember any of the numbers. So it's spreading, that's easy. We spread about 20 tons of rock per hectare.
20 tons per hectare.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it sounds like a lot. Actually, if you go out and watch our operations, it's a fine dusting.
Okay.
You're not seeing a layer of rock spread across, looking like a car park. There's wollastonite's a very light coloured rock, and so you can see if there's no crops in the field and it's sort of bare soil, it's like you sprinkled some sort of white sort of powder across the field. It's a surprisingly light covering, actually. On some of our measurement sites, we actually apply larger amounts of rock in order to get a stronger signal, so we can detect that signal sooner. There we'll go up to 75 tons per hectare or even 100 tons per hectare. Still doesn't actually make it look like a car park. You can put it down and crops grow quite happily through that kind of covering.
And well, there must be other impacts to you doing that. Now I'm getting a picture of what this looks like. Yeah. What are the impacts to the soil more generally?
Right. So that's, again, going back to sort of comparison of different sort of carbon removal pathways. But that's one of the big advantages of enhanced rock weathering, is that not only is it a very scalable approach to removing carbon, it also has a wide variety of co-benefits. So we talked about the impact on the ocean just now, but as the rock weathers, as well as those carbonates forming, it's also releasing minerals into the soil like calcium and silicon, and they are really beneficial for crops. So you see where we're applying feedstock like this, we're seeing stronger root systems and canopy development. You see improved soil, improved physical condition of the plants and water retention, and it makes plants more resilient to disease and able to withstand stress as well. So they become more drought tolerant, for example. It's interesting, the co-benefits for the soil vary quite a lot depending upon where you're applying, whereabouts you're operating as well. So where there are people applying, using enhanced rock weathering and applying feedstock on, say, smallholder land in Africa or India, they're seeing sort of typically like 20 to 40% increase in crop yield. And that's because you've got quite impoverished soil, and so there's extra minerals that are being released to having a real impact. The impact is lower where we're applying in, say, Canada to very well managed land anyway. But even there, we're noticing significant benefits of the types that we just talked about.
You were mentioning before part of your methodology, it is by analyzing pore water, and soil porosity changes across just one parcel of land. And there is still a high degree of uncertainty regarding ERW because of this large surfaces that needs to be analyzed. And while your methodology, it is incredibly advanced, what would you say to critics of ERW still not ready to deploy high quality carbon credits?
What would I say? I would say that the fundamental science behind enhanced rock weathering has been around for a long time, and is largely uncontroversial. It's relatively easy to look at rock and identify, as it weathers, how much carbon dioxide will ultimately be sequestered by that process. That's relatively simple. What's hard is precisely quantifying in any given field, like exactly how much carbon dioxide has been removed. So I guess I'd say that under the underlying uncertainty is perhaps less than people think.
Okay.
I think the other thing is just that it is hard to measure, and if you take just like 2 or 3 soil samples from a field and you try and say exactly how much carbon dioxide has been sequestered on this field, then your error bars are huge. There's so much background noise, it's really hard to quantify accurately. Last year in Canada, though, we took tens of thousands of soil samples across the fields that we deployed on. And so whilst it's really hard to be accurate at the per field level, across a larger project, that accuracy gets a lot higher as well, and the uncertainty comes down a lot. And the standards set by registries like Isometric are very demanding in terms of the bar that you have to hit in order to actually be able to turn these into verified carbon credits that can be sold. So there is a lot of noise. There is quite a bit of uncertainty. I'd say the underlying science is pretty uncontroversial. I'd say that the certainty increases a lot at higher scale. And the standards are rightly hard to hit because people are concerned about this, and people want to know that the carbon that they are paying for has genuinely been removed. I think generally the carbon that's being verified at the moment is very conservative. So if someone is verifying 1,000 tons of carbon having been removed from the project, then probably 4,000 tons of carbon have actually been removed by that project. But because we are factoring in such a conservative position because of the uncertainties that exist, the actual amount being claimed for is relatively low and consequently very robust.
I do think that ERW, it is one of the few CDR that has the gigaton potential, one of the few, because you have that availability of raw materials, the silicates, basalts, it's plenty everywhere. You're able to also have short supply chains that are able to reduce even more your net drawdown per project. My fear it is that we are basing our expectations too much from maybe lab or field trials. There is still a lot of science that needs to be developed. I was reading about X-ray that can be put together with pore water analysis, for example, to be able to measure at different levels the result of the rock of the ERW project. So I've seen projects with the biochar to get together with silicates, which is fantastic. So there is still so much that needs to be analyzed.
Agree.
Let me ask you something else, Matt. Let's talk for a second about Undo. So last year in 2025, you were among the winners of the XPRIZE from the Musk Foundation, which is not a small one. It was $5 million.
Oh, well done.
Yeah, it's a big one. First of all, did they pay? Second, I'm curious to know.
He's got shares. He's got shares in Starlink now instead.
That was my question. I'm curious to know, would you prefer the SpaceX shares rather than the 5 million?
No.
No?
The 5 million was very handy. Thank you very much. And yes, I did pay. No, I mean, XPRIZE was really important. For the benefit of your listeners, I mean, our prize was 5 million, but the actual prize pot was 100 million. This was 100 million XPRIZE for carbon removal, and it ran over 2 years, and it was looking for carbon removal projects. Carbon removal projects had to do a few things to qualify for it. They had to demonstrate that they were active today. They had to demonstrate that they had, concretely confidently, robustly removed 1,000 tons of carbon or more during the competition window.
Ooh.
They had to show that they had sort of fully costed plans to scale to megaton scale. And they had to show that they had a compelling pathway for their technology to scale to gigaton. So, they were really looking for technologies that were, they were real today, but they also had the potential to, have the kind of impact that we actually need if we're going to, address climate change. And of the top 4 prizes, including the top prize, 2 of the winners were enhanced rock weathering, which I think, is a real, and yes, I'm delighted that Undo was one of them, but I think almost more importantly is a signal that, as you were saying, enhanced rock weathering is one of, if not the most promising avenue that we have at the moment for carbon removal. I think a number of the ocean technologies are going to become really important as well, but they're just a little bit further back in their development. And this isn't going to be solved by one technology. Enhanced rock weathering might be able to remove 4 billion tons of carbon dioxide a year. That's still not the 10 billion that we need. We're going to need multiple of these technologies to be developed and taken to scale if we're going to achieve what's necessary.
So you're coming to a crucial question here, Matt. Who pays for it? And how does that scale up to enable you to do more with more money?
Great question. Lots of people pay for it. So as a project developer, Undo have been relatively successful. We've had something like 100 offtakes that we've signed with a whole range of companies from Microsoft, British Airways, McLaren Racing, even offtakes with, I'm told, the Moomins, for those who are fans of the Moomins, and the Queen's Jubilee as well purchased offtakes from us. So there's a whole range of people who are buying. I say there's lots. At the same time, there's clearly nothing like enough for the impact that we want. I mean, at the moment, it's all dominated by the voluntary carbon market. So it's dominated by companies who, I think the biggest buyer by a long way in the market so far has been Microsoft. It's dominated by companies that have deep pockets, who have typically a sort of philanthropic edge as well, like Microsoft. They're interested in doing good here. But they also know, companies like Microsoft know that, in order to hit their ambitious net zero targets, they are going to need to be able to purchase a lot of carbon removal in the years to come. And so they have an invested interest in stimulating the growth of the industry that's going to produce those. So that's kind of what's been driving it until now. But we're not going to get to the gigaton scale impact just with the voluntary carbon market. It's going to have to be through regulation ultimately. And there are promising signs of that happening. There's promising signs in the UK and the EU, especially of moves in that direction. But if countries are going to hit the net zero targets that they're signing up to, and if we are going to have the impact that is necessary, and we are going to have to find a way of having that impact, then regulation is going to have to come in that will require companies to actually purchase these carbon credits.
What if it goes the other way around, where you have, let's say, net zero targets that must be achieved without the purchase of carbon credits? This is an incredibly unstable, instable market. It is absolutely nuts. And it is good that we talked to you, that you Undo base your products on science. But the scandals of the past years across the carbon credit markets, we know them. Unfortunately, we do live in a moment of incredible regulatory instability, which is a pain in the bum.
Yeah, it's worth just, I was just going to say, pausing on carbon credits, because you're right, carbon credits, whenever I'm talking to anybody about what I do, I kind of wince slightly as I get to the carbon credit word. It's think, oh, no, I know what reaction this is going to cause, because you're right, there's been a lot of bad press about carbon credits in recent years, and accusations of greenwashing and, people selling carbon credits that, don't really represent the impact that they claim. There are multiple types of carbon credits, and I wish they sort of didn't come all under the same umbrella. Traditionally, what we've had is carbon avoidance and carbon reduction credits, where basically you're paying somebody else to either avoid emissions that they might have made or to reduce the emissions that they are making. those are the credits where there has been the bad press. They're not all bad by any means. A lot of those are entirely good schemes, but that's where a lot of the bad press has been. What we're talking about is carbon removal credits, which is where you are paying somebody to actually take a ton of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and they are much more. I want to say they're much more sort of robust and uncontroversial. When you talk about paying someone to avoid emissions that they might have made had you not paid for it, then how do I know you'd actually have made those emissions?
Yeah.
And how it's much less well defined. There's a lot more grey. Whereas when you're actually paying someone to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and that's robustly verified, I think that's very well defined.
Your case,
Also,
though, Matt, there are some
Sorry?
that they aren't. Your case are robustly verified, but reforestation or forestation, for example, there is still the science that hasn't been defined. It's way behind an MRV for ERW.
Yeah.
Now we go into the land of acronyms here.
Don't.
Yeah.
but there is still debates on how much a tree it is able to sequester per year. So it is your technology that's got more basis because you got the science behind you. It's a big distinction.
Yeah, and similarly technology like direct air capture as well.
Absolutely. They got a meter.
Forestation, though, reforestation. I mean, Undo, interestingly, started as a reforestation company. We started out as a future forest company, which still exists. When we started, developing sort of seriously into ERW, the company split, and we turned into two separate companies. But the future forest company continues to exist. I think in many ways reforestation projects are great. Everyone likes planting forests. It has loads of additional benefits. But there are significant questions over permanence. I mean, it's obviously not permanent, and it can be very not permanent. If you pay a lot of money to plant forests, then you have forest fires, for instance, and it all burns down, then you've achieved not very much at all. And I always have a slight concern in that, our land is scarce. We can't turn it all into forests. We need the land for agriculture. If we're planting forests in one place, maybe we're cutting down forests somewhere else to make space for growing crops. So reforestation, I think, does have a place, but it is with questions.
You jumped into the next part I wanted to ask you. Let's stop to talk about carbon credits at least for 5 minutes, please. What I wanted to ask you, it is the other positive of enhanced rock weathering, which is farmers and landowners. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, why would a farmer say yes to this?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of it is about the co-benefits that we talked about just now. Especially for projects, say, in places where the land is not well maintained, and where farmers don't have the money to apply the fertilizers and the lime necessary to keep their land in great condition. ERW can have massive impacts on their yield. If you're a smallholder farmer in Kenya, say, 40% impact on your yield is massive. That's a big part of it. The other aspect is the economics of it. In that, you look at the way that Undo is operating in Canada, for instance. Farmers are basically getting the rock for free, so it has benefits to their land, and they're not paying for it. In Canada, we pay for the rock supply and for the spreading, and the farmers just pay for the haulage. Although actually, in some places, even that's covered largely by subsidies. This is very cheap for farmers, and it benefits their land. There is a question over the agronomic benefits, so not that how much they exist, but it's an area where we need to build out a lot more hard evidence, because it varies massively depending on where you're applying the feedstock, what the feedstock is you're applying, what the crop is that's being grown, the condition of the soil, etc. So, there's a number of really good case studies at the moment showing the benefits that occur, but we need to build out a much bigger bank of evidence there.
As well as the upstream sort of operations as well, I think, Matt, as well. We mustn't forget that there's a certain amount of the quarrying and the rock smashing, grinding. What's the word for you get big rocks and turn them into little blocks?
Processing.
There we go. Tell us more about that, because that's going to have a carbon footprint of its own, surely.
It does. It does, and everyone assumes it's really big, but it isn't.
Okay.
So,
I see.
you know, like I said, in the UK, we were actually operating where the rock was a byproduct. I mean, that's obviously
Yeah.
ideal. You know, they're already doing the work anyway. In Canada, we're effectively extracting the rock for purpose. But even with extracting the rock and crushing it and hauling it and spreading it, you know, you take all the emissions from all of that, then you know, ERW is still 90 to 95% efficient. So,
Is
you know, the
it?
emissions from that process are really low. I think, you know, I know what I know exactly what it feels like. You know, you're taking 10,000 tons of rock and you're crushing it down to sort of sub 1 millimeter. That must be hugely energy intensive. Actually, in the grand scheme, it's not too bad.
No, for
Oh, that's
the
tremendous.
quantities you move on. I did some studies on dunite, zeolite, some other basalt rocks, olivine,
Mhm.
which are all rocks that are used to. Some, sorry, not all. Some are used for ERW. Yeah, it is important that you have the overall pictures of the whole LCA of per project to be able to quantify the net drawdown. I wanted to ask you
Yeah.
something else. Part, obviously, of the entirety of this project, which may have a duration 2, 5, 10 years, whatever it is going to be, it is obviously the cost of compliance. And mamma mia, I've been checking the cost of some operators, like to verify and whatnot. We're talking about incredible numbers. Some they charge between 5 to 30 US dollars per ton that gets issued. So, how is this affecting you? Is it a big chunk of your final carbon credit cost or not?
Um, it isn't the part of the cost stack that we're most concerned about at the current
Is it is
time.
not
You know, no.
okay?
So by far the biggest you know, aspect for cost is the MRV, but not the fees that you're paying to the registry. It's the cost of those tens of thousands of soil samples you're taking and the analysis associated with them, the people cost of going out and actually taking the soil samples. You know, like that accounts for something like half the cost of our carbon credits at the moment.
Wow.
And that's a key area where, you know, Undo are really leading the way in sort of developing technology and approaches to MRV that are going to get that cost down. You know, we expect to see that cost come down from about $200 a ton. So that's why I'm more interested in it than I am in the sort of $5-10 that you're paying to the registry,
Yeah.
down to sort of $5 a ton. That's where the really big lever is in the cost stack.
So tell us more about this technology then,
Yeah.
Matt, that you're developing, because that's the scaling issue, isn't it? That's the hurdle
Yeah.
that you're looking at. What's Undo doing in those spaces?
So traditionally and up until now, all of the projects that have been verified, all of the standards that have been used to verify projects have all required the measurement of CDR on every field that you're spreading rock on. So literally every field you go out and spread rock on, you've got to collect samples. You've got to collect samples from that field before you spread the rock, after you spread the rock.
Ugh.
It's 6 monthly annual intervals after that. And
Wow.
it's not even just the number of samples. It's the fact that you've got to keep going back to these farmers. You know, from a farmer's perspective, they've got to handle the fact you're going to come back and trample over their farm however many times collecting
Yeah.
samples for like 5 years into the future. So that's the real sort of killer from the MRV perspective. Our Undo's approach has always been to say, well, what we want to do is we want to scale projects in a relatively small geographic area. So you look where we're operating in Canada, we're scaling up to spreading 300, 400,000 tons of rock a year from the quarry. That's not quite where we're at the moment. We'll be spreading about 100,000 tons this year. And that will all be spread within a relatively small radius. So within like 100 kilometers of the mine. And so you've got a high level of homogeneity there. You've got, you know, very consistent feedstock, and we've got sampling from all across the deposit to demonstrate that feedstock's very consistent. You've got one single climate zone because climate is an important factor in how quickly the rock weathers. You've got a relatively small number of crops and agricultural practices going on in
Mm-hmm.
that region. You know, there's a lot of consistency. And so our argument is that you don't need to, you know, measure on every single field there. So rather we're taking an approach where we set up, you know, a small number, you know, maybe 10, 12 sites across that range where we intensely measure them, you know, so very high density soil sampling. We get the maximum confidence about exactly how much weathering is taking place on those sites. And then we have what we call a similarity measure. So everywhere we spread rock, we do some sampling. We characterize the soil there to make sure that it is very similar to one of the sites where we are actually performing our measurement. And we take the measurements from our deep measurement sites, and we extrapolate from there to the places where we spread rock using our geochemical model. So we have a geochemical model which we calibrate to the results we're seeing at our measurement sites, and then we use that model to extrapolate and account for the small differences that will occur between those and the actual places where we're spreading the rock. Yeah, that's it really. And whilst other projects have been concentrated on the very measurement heavy approach, we've always been trying to build and design for scalar undo. And so that's been sort of the center of what we've been doing over the last couple of years. And we've been working very closely with Isometric, for instance, who are releasing the latest version of their methodology is out for review, which incorporates exactly this approach of using models to do limited extrapolation from sort of individual measurement sites.
Yeah, I can see there's a lot of that. And is that the strategy for scaling? Are you going to become a sort of a platform where other operators can come on board and do this with you?
Absolutely. So I only got sort of halfway through the undo story earlier. We started as a project developer, started in the UK, operating mainly in Canada now. We always wanted to start as a project developer because we always wanted to get to grips with the hard problems behind ERW. And in particular, we wanted to learn how to really scale these projects because, taking ERW to, a scale where you're spreading hundreds of thousands of tons of rock a year is very different to just, doing a relatively small sort of pilot deployment. So we wanted to solve those problems, but our mission has always been to get to gigaton scale, and we never believed that you would do that just as a single project developer. So our approach has been to learn those lessons, build the technical solutions that are necessary, and then make that available as a platform that other would-be ERW project developers can use to set up and run their own projects. And we're talking here about project developers that don't have deep science teams, don't have science teams at all. They're someone that has a rock source, or they have access to land. They've heard about enhanced rock weathering. They want a step-by-step playbook. What do I need to do? How do I do it? Where do I enter the data? And you take care of the rest. So that's always been our approach. We've built that platform. It's already in use with project developers. And actually, as we talk today, I hope when I get out of this, we'll find that we've signed our next deal. We're looking at a really exciting partnership in Kenya.
Okay.
So
there's a reason you just mentioned that Kenyan farmer then.
Yes, although Kenya was also on my mind from having been in the Gates Foundation a few weeks back, focusing on smallholders, and Kenya is one of the areas that they're particularly interested in. So yeah, the platform players is a big thing there, and we really want to make it so that anybody can be an ERW project developer and really deliver and scale really robust ERW projects.
Amazing. So you've got the technology platform. You're not going to run out of rock. What are the limitations to growth for this technology and for carbon removal as a whole?
Well, we talked about offtakes earlier, and the need to drive, a much greater level of offtakes. So, I mean, that's obviously one key part. We didn't talk about financing yet. Financing is another challenge. This is obviously a cash-intensive process. You pay for purchasing the rock, spreading the rock. It can take 5-10 years before all of the carbon is sequestered, and you get the full return on that. So financing is a critical part.
Let me ask you about that, Matt.
Yeah.
Because we have ERW that's got operational scalability. You have low-tech deployment, agricultural co-benefits, but bankability depends on buyer of take, which you have an incredible interest from buyers, MRV confidence, and you have developed your own platform and technology, delivery risk, permanence, price stability, insurance, and underwriting. So the point is, there is already the interest from large buyers, but now what do you think will make ERW more bankable for lenders? What's the missing point?
All of those things. I mean, you've just kind of lifted the points that I was going to talk
Did
to you
I?
there. I
Okay.
mean, there's kind of, that there's an education piece first, I guess. ERW is
Very
new,
true.
and
Yeah.
if you're a lender, then I think lenders are only just sort of starting to sort of come around to sort of possibility and learn what it's all about. Uh, you know, I'm sure you're aware, Undo signed for our latest Microsoft offtake, we signed a sort of first of its kind financing deal with Inlandsys.
Oh, nice. No, I didn't know
And,
that.
the basis for that is, like you say, really, just drilling down on all of that risk, trying to take out the risk and the uncertainty at every stage of the process. So that includes, yes, it includes confidence in like how much CDR will actually result, where Undo's geochemical model enables us to predict the rate of CDR with a reasonable amount of confidence.
Confidence.
Um, but it also involves really good contracting at every stage of the process. So really high quality contracts with off takers, where you don't get much better than a good off take with someone like Microsoft. But also like feedstock supply, for instance, having really robust contracting with your feedstock supplier. We've contracted with our quarry in Canada, so we have a multi-year contract in place there, ensuring feedstock supply, guaranteeing price, and actually for the feedstock supplier as well, that kind of contract gives them the ability to invest strategically to make sure they can scale to meet the demand. There's the tech platform, showing that you are, really robust, the sort of digital proof of work, if you like, showing that you're really robustly tracking the data, that it's all there, it's all auditable. What else? G7, that helps quite a bit. So one of the reasons that we're operating in Canada rather than starting in somewhere like Kenya is that that's another source of uncertainty and risk that you can take out by operating in a G7 country. So we're going to have to operate everywhere, but to start with, these kinds of financing deals are going to be easier if you make everything as easy for yourself as you can.
Yeah.
The final piece I'd say, as I mentioned, like geochemical modeling just now gives a fair amount of certainty as to, the sort of the return on investment, if you like. But actually what will be much better is we're looking at a project like our project in Canada, looking at going really sort of, really scaling a single project there. So you're operating with a consistent feedstock in a single area. Once you've gone through 1 year and you've verified the carbon removal from the first years of jobs, the second year is 10 times higher confidence. You're pretty sure what's going to happen the next year and the year after. So, going deep on a single project rather than setting up lots of small projects with different quarries, different mines, different countries is another way of providing that confidence to lenders.
There is a lot to do, there is still a lot to do. Like you said, it is it is not a new methodology or the knowledge around the carbon cycle underneath, say the ERW has been there for a lot. It is to
It's been
use
there
that.
since like 1950 or something.
Yeah,
People are always amazed at how long
yeah,
ERW's been around.
yeah. It is just that analysis, that verification part of it, that it is not easy. I did read a lot about ocean alkalinity enhancement too, and also for them, it depends what. There are a couple of technologies. One company in Italy called LimeNet, and they do the measurement on land, because what they do it is to put into the water a heavily alkaline solution. So they're able to start to do their calculation. Their MRV, it is land based, while the actual
Yeah.
enhancement happens into the water. So there is still a lot to do. It is the fascinating part of it. Come on, also that
It is, and there are
attention,
loads of
study,
excitement.
trial and error, and everything. It is incredibly fascinating. Plus, you have the background from Microsoft themselves as well. You are a super techy, knowledgeable person that knows how to do all of that stuff that M&I doesn't know where to start from. So it is it is also good that you combine that with the science underneath. right?
Yeah, technology, as in just sort of straight software technology, has a significant role to play here too.
I want to ask you to wrap it up. Where do you see Undo and ERW in general in 10 years?
Tricky. It's all about timing, isn't it? It's all about how quickly the scale of offtakes takes off, really, which is going to come down to how quickly regulation comes in. I don't know. I mean, we will be there. We will be succeeding. We will have proven out a lot of the unknowns still on MRV. I think we'll have answers to a lot more of the questions in 10 years' time, definitely. I am sure that we will be there, and we will have a reasonable number of partners on our platform. How fast it scales, it really comes down to how quickly the offtakes scale. I don't know where we'll be in 10 years' time, honestly.
And maybe
you could have just said that at the beginning.
Well, maybe if you can solve having to do quite so many tests in quite so many fields, that would unlock a certain scalability and financial efficiency to it all too. So we know that lots of technologies are being developed in those areas, in soil sampling, in data, and in all sorts of monitoring and reporting technologies. So they'll all help too. I'm a bit more optimistic. I hope to see it everywhere. There is no silver bullet for climate change. There's just 1,000, efforts in all different directions. But I think this is a big one. I think this is nice.
We will get there. We'll get there. My hesitation is only, where will it be in 10 years' time? I don't know. I think ERW will succeed. I think ERW will scale. It will become a multi-gigaton removal pathway. We need it to. And I think in that time frame, we'll also see a number of other serious pathways develop as well. Will it be 10 years? Will it be 15? Will it be 8? Can't tell you.
There are no downsides, and you also help farmers, which they do need the support of anybody. So I mean, seriously, if you manage and you have to reduce that MRV risk, or whatever you want to call it, you're there. You're into the gigatons.
And in 10
right?
years, I might have learned what the acronym stands for too.
Okay,
We'll find some more acronyms for you after that one.
Matt, fantastic chat. Thank you so much for being on Raw Green. And
we can all go and cool down now.
Yes,
we can all go.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks,
Fantastic
Matt.
having
That's
you.
great.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Raw Green. If you made it this far, you probably enjoyed it. So don't forget to hit subscribe and follow our podcast. It's an awesome way to support our community. At Obi, we're all about research, life cycle assessment, and the green tech innovation. Stay in touch through our socials or visit our website. Links are ready for you in the description. Catch you in the next episode. Ciao!